The wedding hall in Seoul glittered like something carved out of ice and gold. 3,000 white orchids, a string quartet tuning beneath a chandelier shaped like a falling comet. Kang Ji-hoon stood at the altar in a tailored black suit, his jaw tight, his hands folded the way his father had taught him. Calm hands mean a calm empire. He was 34. He owned 4 shipping conglomerates, a controlling stake in 2 banks, and, until 11 seconds ago, the absolute certainty that he knew every person in this room. Then the doors at the back of the hall opened, and a woman he had never met walked in wearing red. Not white, not gold, red, in a room built entirely around the absence of color. The quartet faltered. 300 guests turned. Ji-hoon's bride, Yoon Soo-ah, gripped his arm hard enough to leave marks he wouldn't notice until that night. The woman in red did not sit. She did not apologize. She walked halfway up the aisle, looked directly at Ji-hoon, not at the bride, not at the priest, at him, and said in flawless, unhurried Korean, "If you marry her, your father's company dies in 11 months. I'm the only person in this building who knows why." Then she turned and walked back out into the rain. Nobody moved. Somewhere behind him, his mother whispered a name that wasn't in any guest list. Abina, and then immediately denied having said anything at all. Ji-hoon looked at his bride. He looked at his mother's face, which had gone the color of the orchids. And for the first time in his adult life, Kang Ji-hoon did something his father never had. He ran after a stranger. He caught her under the awning of a closed flower shop 2 streets down, soaked through, her red dress darkened to wine. Up close, she looked nothing like a woman capable of detonating a wedding. She looked tired, young, but tired in the way people get when they've been carrying something heavy for a long time without putting it down. "Who are you?" he said. Not a question, a demand wrapped in disbelief. Someone who just saved you 11 months of finding out the hard way. Her English was American accented, clipped with something else underneath. West African, maybe, though he couldn't place it precisely. My mother said a name. Abina. Something flickered behind her eyes and vanished, fast, controlled. Your mother's mistaken. She doesn't make mistakes. She spent 30 years making sure of that. The woman studied him the way someone studies a door they're deciding whether to walk through. Then she reached into a small bag and pulled out a photograph, old, the corners soft with handling, and held it up just long enough for him to see it before tucking it away again. It was his father, 30 years younger, standing on a beach Ji-hoon didn't recognize, his arm around a Ghanaian woman who was laughing at something outside the frame. "Ask your mother who a Joa Mensa was," the woman said. "Ask her before you marry anyone else." And then, in the time it took a delivery truck to pass between them, she was gone. Not walked away, gone. Gone. The street empty, the rain falling on nothing. Approximate. 30 seconds in, natural CTA placement. If stories filled with hidden identities, unforgettable romance, and shocking mysteries keep you hooked, subscribe and join us for more cinematic adventures. Like this video if you believe one encounter can change an entire destiny. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The wedding did not happen. Soo-ah's family withdrew within the hour, citing irreconcilable circumstances, which was a generous way of saying your mother is hiding a 30-year-old secret and your bride just watched a stranger blow up her life. Ji-hoon found his mother in the family's private study at 11 that night, sitting very still in the dark. "A Joa Mensa," he said. His mother's hands, folded in her lap, tightened by exactly 1 knuckle. "Where did you hear that name?" "A woman said it to me, then disappeared like she'd never existed." "Mother, who is she?" A long silence. Then, quietly, "She's no one. She died in 1996. "Then who was the woman tonight?" His mother looked up at him, and for one unguarded second, Ji-hoon saw something he had never seen on her face in 34 years of life. Fear. "I don't know," she said, and that frightens me more than anything she said. 3 days later, Ji-hoon's head of security, a clipped, methodical man named Park Tae-young, brought him a single sheet of paper. Facial recognition got 1 hit before she vanished off every camera in the district, Tae-young said. A nurse, registered at Seoul National Hospital under the name Lee Hannah. Worked 3 12-hour shifts last month. Then nothing. No address past a P.O. box. No family on record. No social media older than 14 months. 14 months, Ji-hoon repeated, like she started existing 14 months ago. There's something else. Taeyong hesitated, which was unlike him. I cross-referenced the hospital photo against an old company archive. Your father did business in Ghana in the early 90s, cocoa shipping contracts. There's a woman in 3 of the old photos who looks identical to her, down to a small scar above the left eyebrow. That woman would be 60 by now. I know. Ji-hoon stared at the 2 photographs side by side. One from 1994, one from last year. The same scar, the same eyes, 30 years and an ocean apart. Find her, he said. Whoever, whatever she is. Find her. He found her first. A week later, a letter arrived at his office with no return address, written in handwriting that matched nothing on file. You're looking in the wrong country. The answer isn't in Seoul. It never was. If you want the truth, come to Cape Coast. Come alone, and bring the photograph your mother thinks she burned. There was no signature. Only, pressed into the corner of the paper, a small charcoal sketch of an Adinkra symbol, Gainayam, except for God. A symbol his mother had once told him, in a rare, unguarded moment years ago, meant nothing happens without something behind it. Ji-hoon booked a flight to Ghana that night. He told no one. The woman in red had vanished like she'd never existed. But the truth, it seemed, had just decided it was done hiding. Cape Coast smelled like salt and old stone, and something underneath that Ji-hoon couldn't name. History. Maybe the kind that doesn't wash off a coastline no matter how many tides come through. He'd expected an ambush. Instead, he found a coastal market alive with color, the Atlantic slamming white against the castle walls in the distance, and absolutely no sign of the woman who'd summoned him 8,000 kilometers from home. It was a fisherman, mending nets near the harbor, who finally said the name that turned Ji-hoon's afternoon upside down. You're looking for Abina, the old man said, not looking up. Everyone here knows Abina. Quiet girl. Lost her mother young. Lived with her aunt past the old church for some years before she left for the city. Abina what? Is her surname Mensa? The fisherman finally looked up, and something careful entered his expression. Why does a Korean man in an expensive shirt want to know Abina Mensa's family name? Because I think she's connected to my father. And because I just chased a woman across 2 continents who keeps disappearing before I can ask her a single real question. The old man studied him a long moment, then set down his net. Then you should talk to her aunt, if she'll still talk about it. Most people here don't. Not since the trouble. What trouble? The fire, the fisherman said simply, and went back to his nets like he'd already said too much. Abina's aunt, a sharp-eyed woman named Adwoa, lived in a blue house 3 streets back from the water, surrounded by a garden of hibiscus she clearly tended with more care than she gave most conversations. She let Ji-hoon in only after staring at him for a full minute. As if his face contained an answer, she was checking against memory. You have his eyes, she finally said. Kang Min-yoon's eyes. You knew my father. I knew the man your father was before he became a name on shipping containers. She poured tea without asking if he wanted any. He came here in 1994 for cocoa contracts and fell in love with my niece's mother, my sister, Ajoa. It was not supposed to happen. He was already engaged in Korea. She knew. She loved him anyway, the way young women sometimes love men who are never going to choose them in the end. Abina said Ajoa died in 1996. That's what the official story says. Adwoa's mouth tightened. There was a fire at the harbor warehouse where Ajoa worked. The same week your father's company was finalizing the contracts, and the same week his fiancée arrived from Korea to inspect the operations. Ajoa died in that fire. Officially an accident. Unofficially, she stopped herself. Unofficially, a child survived a fire that was supposed to kill her too. And that child has spent her whole life being told, by people who should have protected her, that asking questions about it would only get her hurt. Ji-hoon's chest went cold. Abina is Ajoa's daughter. Abina is your father's daughter. Adwoa corrected, quiet and final. Which makes her, in every way that matters except the legal one, your sister. Mid-badge to emotional turn, disappearance / clue beat. The room tilted. Every assumption Ji-hoon had built about the wedding crasher, the nurse with no past, the woman who knew his family's secrets, collapsed and rebuilt itself into something far stranger than romantic mystery. Then why, he said slowly, did she look at me the way she did? Why follow me halfway around the world to stop a wedding instead of just telling me the truth from the start? Adwoa's expression softened, just slightly, into something like pity. Because she doesn't know what you are to her yet, either. She found out about your father 2 years ago, by accident, going through her mother's old letters after I finally let her see them. She spent every day since trying to decide whether to destroy your family the way she believes your family destroyed hers, or to warn you before it happened to someone else. Warn me about what, exactly? That your mother was in Ghana the week of the fire, Adwoa said. That she has never, in 30 years, explained where she was on the night the warehouse burned. Ji-hoon left Cape Coast not with answers, but with worse questions and a single new lead. Abina had taken a teaching position in Kumasi under yet another assumed name. A Kojua this time, after the confrontation at the wedding had clearly spooked her into running again. He found her in a one-room schoolhouse on the edge of the city, correcting a stack of children's exercise books by lamplight. She didn't run this time. She simply set down her pen, like she'd known this conversation was always going to happen eventually and had finally stopped postponing it. You talked to my aunt. You're my sister. Half, she said. Don't soften it into something prettier than it is. I'm not trying to soften anything. I'm trying to understand why you let me almost marry someone while sitting on a secret this big and then blew it up in front of 300 people instead of just telling me privately. For the first time since the wedding hall, something cracked in her composure. Because I needed witnesses, she said. Because every time I try to raise this quietly, the people protecting your mother's secret have made sure it goes nowhere. I needed it loud enough that it couldn't be buried again. Buried again. Ji-hoon caught the word. You think the fire was deliberate. Abina was quiet for a long moment, the lamp flickering between them. I think, she said finally, that there's a reason my mother's death certificate lists the wrong time of the fire. I think there's a reason the only surviving inspector's report disappeared from the Cape Coast archive the same month your father's company donated to its renovation fund. And I think, her voice dropped, there's a reason your mother flew home from Ghana 2 days before the official timeline says she ever arrived. The room went silent, except for the lamp's quiet hiss. I have proof, Abina said. Or I had it. My mother kept a journal. I found 3 pages of it in her old letters. The rest, she swallowed. The rest disappeared from my aunt's house 6 months ago. Someone broke in. Took nothing else. Ji-hoon felt the floor of his entire life shift beneath him. Someone close to my family. Someone, Abina said, who is still very interested in making sure the truth stays buried with my mother. That night, Ji-hoon called his mother from his hotel room in Kumasi, intending to confront her directly. She didn't answer. Instead, 2 hours later, Park Taeyong called him with a voice tighter than Ji-hoon had ever heard it. Sir, your mother's flying to Accra. Tonight. She booked the ticket the moment your assistant logged your travel itinerary into the company system. She's coming here. There's more. A pause, the kind that meant bad news was loading behind it. I pulled the inspector's report you mentioned. The one Ms. Mensah said disappeared. It didn't disappear, sir. It was transferred into a private archive, owned by a holding company registered under your mother's maiden name. Ji-hoon closed his eyes. She's had it this whole time. It looks that way, sir. Then why is she flying here now, after 30 years of silence? Taeyong's voice dropped lower. Because 30 minutes ago, someone uploaded an anonymous tip to 3 Korean news outlets, with photographs of your father and a Joa Mensah attached. It's already trending. Sir, I don't think your mother is flying to Ghana to hide the truth anymore. Then what's she doing? I think, Taeyong said carefully, she's flying there to stop whoever leaked it before they release something far worse than photographs. His mother arrived in Accra looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. Not the controlled, comet chandelier woman of the wedding hall, but someone who had clearly been carrying a weight for 30 years and had just watched it become public anyway. You should have told me, Ji-hoon said, the moment they were alone in the hotel's private lounge. I should have done 100 things differently, his mother said. I was 26 and pregnant with you and terrified of losing everything I'd built my life around. Your father told me he was ending it with a Joa. I believed him. I came to Ghana to confirm it for myself. Did you confirm it? His mother's hands trembled, just slightly, around her teacup. I confirmed that he wasn't ending it. I confirmed it the night before the fire, in an argument none of us have ever spoken about since. Mother, I did not start that fire, she said, sharp and immediate, like she'd rehearsed denying exactly this for 30 years. But I have spent every year since wondering if my leaving, if the things I said to Ajoa that night, set something in motion I never intended. I took the inspector's report because I was afraid of what it would say about me, not because I knew what it actually contained. I never read past the first page. I was a coward, Ji-hoon. I have been a coward for 30 years. Then let's read it now, Abina's voice said from the doorway. None of them had heard her enter. She stood with a thin folder in her hands. The missing pages of her mother's journal, recovered, it turned out, from the very private archive Taeyong had traced. Because I think all three of us have spent 30 years afraid of the wrong thing. The pages, in Ajoa Mince's own handwriting, told a story none of them had been braced for. The fire had not been an accident, and it had not been deliberate sabotage by Ji-hoon's mother. It had been started by a third party entirely, a rival shipping consortium that had lost the cocoa contract to Kang Min-jun's company days earlier, and had set the warehouse fire intending to destroy shipment records, not to harm anyone. Ajoa, working a late shift she wasn't scheduled for, had been caught inside. And there was one more page. The last one, written by the shake of the handwriting, in the hours immediately after the fire began, before help arrived. Ajoa Mince's final entry, addressed not to Ji-hoon's father, but to the daughter she didn't yet know would survive. If you ever read this, know that I never blamed anyone but the men who set the match. Not him, not her. Whatever happens to me, don't let this become a story about who hated who. Let be the truth, finally, after everyone stopped being afraid of it. Abina read it aloud with a steadiness that broke halfway through the last line. Ji-hoon's mother was openly crying by the end. 30 years of guilt cracking open into something closer to grief than shame. She forgave you, Abina said quietly, to a woman she'd spent 2 years hating from a distance. Before any of us knew enough to forgive each other. Major twist. It would have been an ending. It almost was. Then Park Taeyong arrived at the hotel, pale, with a final piece neither Ji-hoon nor Abina had been looking for. The anonymous tip to the press, he said. I traced the upload. It wasn't a journalist. It wasn't a rival company. He hesitated. It came from inside your father's old company archive, sir. Logged in under a credential that's been inactive for 14 months, until last week. 14 months, Ji-hoon repeated slowly, the number landing with the same weight Abina's hospital records once had. Someone wanted this story out, Taeyong said. Someone who had access to records no one else should have had. Someone who knew exactly which photographs would do the most damage and exactly when to release them for maximum impact. The same week of a wedding announcement, the same archive your mother used to hide the report. Abina went very still. It was me, she said. The room turned to her in silence. Not the wedding. I didn't plan the wedding. That was instinct, panic, 30 years of secrecy boiling over in one impossible moment. But the leak, yes. I logged into an old hospital terminal under my mother's maiden credentials 2 weeks ago, after I found out the report had been buried in a private archive instead of destroyed like everyone assumed. I wanted the truth out before anyone could bury it again. I just didn't expect it to land the same week as everything else. She looked at Ji-hoon, steady despite the tremor under her voice. I'm not sorry the truth is out. I'm sorry I didn't trust either of you enough to tell you myself first. Ji-hoon stood at the hotel window that night, looking out over a city that held more of his history than he'd known existed a month earlier, and tried to decide what kind of man he wanted to be now that he knew all of it. Abina found him there, the folder of her mother's letters finally closed for good. What happens now, she asked. To the company. To your mother. She hesitated, whatever this is between us. The company will survive a 30-year-old scandal, Ji-hoon said. Companies always do. My mother will have to live with 30 years of silence finally being witnessed, which might be harder for her than any boardroom consequence. He turned to face her. As for what this is between us, I don't think half-sister covers it. I think it's something closer to the only person who's told me the complete truth since this whole thing started, even when the truth made you look guilty. I'm guilty. Of a leak, at least. You're guilty of wanting your mother's story told honestly after 30 years of other people deciding it for her, Ji-hoon said. I don't think that's the same thing. Abina almost smiled, the first real one he'd seen from her. Ajoa would have liked you. She always said Kang Min had a talent for saying exactly the right thing 5 years too late. Then I'll have to work on the timing. 3 weeks later, Ji-hoon's mother formally released the inspector's report to the public, alongside a statement acknowledging the company's historical ties to the fire and establishing a scholarship fund in Ajoa Mince's name at the very schoolhouse where Abina had been teaching under a false name. The press called it a reckoning. Sua's family quietly settled the broken engagement out of court. The company's stock dipped for 9 days and recovered. It should have been the end, except that on the morning the scholarship fund was officially announced, Adwoa called Ji-hoon directly, a call he hadn't expected, on a number he hadn't given her. There's something you should know, she said, her voice careful in a way that made the back of his neck go cold. Before the fire, before any of this, Ajoa wrote one more letter, not in the journal, separate, addressed to a name I don't recognize, not your father's, not Abina's. A name I always assumed was a mistake until I found it again last night, going through what's left of her things. What name? Adwoa was quiet for a long moment. Yours, she finally said. Written 4 months before you were born. The line went silent, except for the static of an ocean's distance between them. Ji-hoon had spent a month learning that the woman who crashed his wedding was his sister. He had spent a month learning his father's silence, his mother's guilt, and a fire that had reshaped 3 lives before any of them had a say in it. He had not expected the story to still be holding one more name in reserve. Send it to me, he said quietly. Whatever it says. Adwoa didn't answer right away. And somewhere in that silence, Ji-hoon understood, with a certainty that settled into his chest like cold water, that the truth that had changed everything wasn't finished changing it yet. If this story kept you guessing until the very end, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable mysteries, romances, and cinematic adventures. Now tell us in the comments, would you keep searching for the truth, even if it changed everything you believed?